Hi, welcome to the small shed. This week on the Cyclekart I'm looking at pedals. See you in a minute. Now, when I'd got the Cyclekart onto its four wheels effectively and as far as I was concerned made it into a rolling chassis, I decided there were four major things to consider from then on to get it to a running cart. That was fitting the engine and transmission, putting a braking system in, putting electrics in, and connecting the driver, if you like, to the Cyclekart. And by that I mean the pedal setup for brakes and accelerator. And that was one thing that I've been sort of playing around with for a long time. I started this out in around August 2022. Actually now I'm just finishing off fixing the plate into the cart today, and we're into current times, if you like. We're at March, April 2023, so it's taken a while to sort of get the whole idea sorted, messing around with brake master cylinders and things like that, getting the wrong one, all sorts of things like that. It's a relatively simple job. It's a relatively short video today, but let's go and have a look and see how we're going to go about doing it. So it's time to have a look at pedal setup, if you like, and that ties in a bit with the braking, but we'll look at the pedal setup at the moment. I bought a pair of Chinese go-kart pedals that cost probably around £15, I think, something like that, so they weren't expensive. Their quality isn't the greatest in the world, but they look substantial enough to work. The two pedals you get, one of which is clearly for the accelerator and one of which is clearly for the brake. And I say that because the one for the accelerator has got a cable connector in it on the side, so that one will be going on the right and that one will be going on the left. I'm not sure yet. My first thought was where to hang them, to suspend them from the top on a bar, and to that extent I found a bit of rod, which is, I think, 8mm. That's a nice comfortable fit on there for them to hang on and use the accelerator that way. However, that in itself brings a couple of disadvantages, if you like, in that it means you're having to get a mechanism to get these things much higher up in the air to mount them, and therefore you've got leverage going on something that's 4 or 5 inches above the base of your cart. So I think I'm going to go to that way round, and I think that'll be easier for a couple of things. So I've been playing around and I found some bolts which have got thread and just a plain collar, and they're just both the right size. And I've found that if you thread the end of my 4040 aluminium, these bolts will fit into that neatly, and ignoring the fact these are offcuts, I go the other way because of the stop that's in there as well. There's a little throttle stop to put a screw in, so I'll put that on there. Now I think that if I mount that on a piece of aluminium, I've got lots of bits of old fences from circular saws and band saws and things like that. There's a profile there that's quite light. I think if I mount a piece of 4040 on that, it'll be the full width, it'll be, you know, 40 or 50 mil wide. It'll bolt down to that, and then I think that will be ideal as a mounting point. What it also does is mean I can adjust my pedal position to suit comfort, and again that's an advantage with it being on the floor rather than up in the air. So I think that's going to be the arrangement. Possibly put a stop in behind it, or using a bolt through there. That's threaded 8mm, I think that's 10, but I can put a throttle stop in there, and of course it'll be sprung on the cable back to the accelerator on the carburetor. There'll be a big double spring on that, so that will hopefully give me the one pedal on one side. For the other side I've got a brake caliper, dual pad bike caliper and master cylinder for it says up to about 200cc I think, so I'm hoping that'll be plenty enough. If not, I'll have to upgrade it, but I think that will do. Clearly the connecting cable isn't long enough, and I have just drained that down at the moment, so we will lose the disc brake at the moment, but you can get replacement tubes, brake lines with the caliper, with the banjos on the end, up to a couple of meters long, and I've got one on order that will do me out through all the way along the side of the cart and out into the brake disc at the end, so that will go into effectively a spares bin, and I'll worry about the mechanics of that end of it, the actual brake disc itself, another day. But again, similar situation with that. It's sort of set up for this. There's a clevis pin needed. Probably need a little spacer in that hole because the hole is smaller than the hole in the brake rod, but we can sort that out, I'm sure. But if you put a pin through there, and the same deal as I had before, piece of this 40/40, I found that if I cut one of the legs off the 40/40, it doesn't impinge on the throttle itself. And again, we'll have to mount the cylinder somewhere, but you can see that's already got the brake mounting pretty straightforwardly. There's a little bit of adjustment on the arm, and I can again, I'm just deciding whether to mount the whole thing on a piece of this aluminium so that it moves the brake pedal and the cylinder, the master cylinder, or whether or not the master cylinder will be somewhere else, but again on a slide. I don't know yet. Still trying to sort out how I'll fix and mount that, but I think that's the throttle and brake pedal mounts pretty much sorted. I need to get back into the cockpit with the seat in it, or a mock-up of a seat, so that I can see exactly where I need to be putting my heels and where I think the ideal brake position and accelerator position will be. But as you can see, I think I've got a reasonably clear, by cutting off that one leg of the section of the aluminium, got a reasonably flat plane that my foot can go against and work the brake. So I think that's where we're going with that. We'll play with it a bit more and get positions sorted on the cart, but at least I think I've got a working setup. So at the other end of the cart there's a brake disc, there's a caliper which at the moment it's got a spacer in it to prevent the pistons getting squashed or flying out and falling out, although there's no pressure on them now because I've removed all the fluid. But that is going to go somewhere on the bottom. I'm thinking by the look of that bracket there that if that mounts more or less underneath, I can get a T out from that rear rail coming outwards in the 40/40, and I can just mount that bracket right to it. But we'll get closer to that one when we've got the motor mount and the whole of the rear section into one sort of contiguous lump. But certainly that will fit. The question as to whether or not it will stop the cart is a different matter, but I think the principle is there, and once I've got it done I can upgrade to larger caliper or larger cylinders if I need to, but let's try it out first and see what happens. Now the pedal arrangement has moved on a bit. I was originally going to put a pedal on either side and have a right foot go and a left foot stop, and the more I think about it, and having driven go-karts in the past, that is not really what I think I want, because I well remember coming out of a go-kart circuit one night and getting to the end of the road, and I pressed hard with my left foot to brake, and it was the clutch that went down, and I nearly hit the wall on the end, because I was used to a quarter of a turn on the steering wheel turning the car at 90 degrees, and again that didn't happen. So I think I'm going to stick with the fact that I've got an automatic anyway that I drive all the while, so I'm just going to use right foot go, right foot stop, and move across, and I think there's enough gap there on the pedals to be able to do that. We will see. So they'll be biased slightly over to the right, and I'll probably put a left foot rest on the left hand side. But we've got a bracket made for the bottom, which is again just a bit of old extruded aluminium, and then I've bolted some brackets that I've made out of the 40/40 aluminium, drilled through, got the bolts on. That will give me a stop on there. That can be bolted down to the floor at whatever position I want it to be in. Brake master cylinder is on there, so I've got to be careful how that, because the feed comes out the back of that for the hydraulic brake, so I may need to move that slightly to one side. We'll see when we get a little bit further down the line, but what it means is I can now get a cable and a hydraulic run and get those sorted and see how we go. The only thing I think I will change at the moment is that I put these on individual bolts, and I think there's no reason why I shouldn't run a solid shaft all the way through with a spacer in the middle and then tighten it either end. I don't know, I've got to think about that one as well. It does mean I can swap a pedal out relatively easily, but how often are you going to have to do that anyway? But we're making some progress on the pedals. I need to get my cables ordered and my hydraulic tubing to get the master cylinder through to the brake caliper at the back, but I can measure for that now. I've got a rough idea of where it's all going, and we'll see where we go from there. Right, so it's time to think about the brakes now. I've been messing around all morning with lots of different things, and this has been one of them. I've swapped sides, I've swapped whether it's on the top or the bottom, and I think this has come out as the favoured position for the caliper. I've got a vertical line there through those two fixing bolts, which I think if I get some of the 40/40 aluminium, I can bolt down to that rail there and come up vertically, and it won't need a great deal in the way of spacing to get to where I want to be as a support for it. That'll go in there, effectively inside there. So I think that's the best. I've tried it on the other side, and there's not really room. That's the closest I can come in to clear the pull start housing, which I could take off altogether, but I'm reluctant to do that because it just gives you a backup if you haven't got a problem, if you get a problem with your starter. And I've got room, I think, in the side there. And the beauty of this is that the bleed nipple is right at the top of the system, so it should help me getting the brakes bled as well. So I'll just get this thing set exactly vertical, and then I can transfer that position onto the chassis rail down the bottom and work it backwards from that. I think we'll see how we get on. Now, you wouldn't think fitting a brake pipe would cause so much carnage, but it was always the intention to run the brake pipes in these channels on one side and the electrics in the other on the chassis, and I've had to strip the whole back down to get it to go through to the rear compartment, and it's only when I've taken it apart I've realised that in fact there's a bolt going through it at that point, so it couldn't go through there anyway. But all is not totally lost, in that there is a piece there of channel that comes in at that level that I can just relieve out or drill through. So I'd have had to have taken it out to get that bit done, but it's a fairly major strip down just to get that in. But once I've got this brake pipe in, I can really start and get it all hooked up and working. Right, so I've mounted the bracket I'd got the pedals on onto a piece of flat aluminium. I've fabricated a bracket to hold the brake cylinder, so that is now working as it should do. A little bit of adjustment required, it's slightly out of line, but we can move that around. What that means is I can bolt this plate through the floor, and it effectively gives me a means to move the whole pedal box forward and backward to suit. So that gives me a bit of adjustment there. So I think that's pretty much sorted it. I've got to get a cable for the accelerator. I've got my brake line running through to the disc caliper at the back. Got the reservoir on, mounted up, ready up top, so that we can bleed the system when we're ready. And as I say, that is now fully adjustable. I've got to do a throttle return spring mounting some way. Don't quite know how I'm going to do that yet, but we'll wait until we get the cable in and see how that works. But I'm quite pleased with that as a bit of progress. That's got the pedals pretty much sorted, I think. Right, that's bolted the pedal box in. As I say, it is adjustable. I can move it back and forth by just re-drilling the holes if I want to, but just got to order some right length bolts. Those are a little bit short to work with a nylock underneath, so I'm just going to order those. But as far as anything else is concerned now, that's I've got the brake pedal in, brake cylinders in, I've relined it so it's dead in line with the pedal now, so that works well. And we've got to get a throttle cable organised next, and then connect that up, but I'm happy with that. That's sorted that out. Right, that's another day closer to getting the thing rolling and running. We've got the pedal box in. I'm quite pleased with that. Something that I'd didn't really know how I was going to do or how it would work out, but it seems to have worked out quite well. I've got to move on now and measure up for the throttle cable and see how to spring that, but I think that's far less of a mental block for me that the hydraulic braking and everything was going to be. So that's that one sorted. Hope the video was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next week when we'll be doing something different on the Cyclekart. I'll see you then. Bye.